but people use the term rewilding, and it's caught on. What's the difference between the two words, and what do they actually mean? Because they're quite elastic terms, really.
I really used the word wilding for my book, the original book, Wilding, about the story of how we rewilded net, really tongue-in-cheek, because at the time, rewilding was a word that nobody dared use, and it was a kind of, no one used the R word. Now, even 5 years on, politicians are using it. We kind of, pretty much all of us know what we mean by rewilding. But when I was writing, the last book, one of the problems was that people quite often assumed that that little prefix re meant that rewilders were trying to recapture some idyllic Eden before human impact, that we were going back to the past somehow and wanting to resurrect mammoths and rewild the whole world. And that's not really rewilding at all. We can't recapture the past. We know that human beings and all sorts of other influences have moved the planet on. But what we can do is use the tools that we have at our disposal now, the animals we have left to us, the ways we can recover water systems, and the knowledge, the inspiration of the past, the inspiration of how natural processes worked in the past to create novel ecology. So we can put nature back in the driving seat and really just let things evolve as they want to, because nature essentially knows best. So success of the last book, I think really the publishers wanted to give you, and what I love about the word rewilding is that it is almost, as you say, it's plastic and indefinable. It defines definitions, and that really is exactly what rewilding is all about.
Charlie, can we go backwards a little bit? Thanks, Isabella, and talk about the last few years, because I mean, you went through some pretty hairy times with this estate, didn't you? And I know that's covered a lot in, and that's covered very well in Isabella's previous book, Wilding. And now, you open the pages of this book, and there are long-horned cattle on the lawn in front of the house, and then a lovely detail of a stork nesting in the chimneys above the sort of castellated roof. Now, I mean, it's a huge, long journey, but what's it been like for you to go through that? There must have been some pretty stressful periods early on.
I'll come to the stressful periods, Tom, in a second. But in the wintertime, Izzy's office is heated by a fireplace over there. And the bloody stork has built a nest on top of her chimney. So for the last 2 winters, she has had to spend it in sort of, obviously, cashmere, because that's the sort of people we are. Cashmere wrapped shawls and things, and shivering at her keyboard.
You're suffering for the stork. It's not all plain sailing, is it? Yeah.
What I guess what we were experiencing, and a lot of farmers were experiencing it in the end of the 90s, was we were dairy farmers as well as arable farmers, was a collapse in the dairy, the milk price at our farm gate. Yeah. And that was because the Milk Marketing Board was decided that we'd get rid of that, and that the market was freed up, and then we were all then selling to individual dairies. And that was inevitably going to mean that the competition would then drive down prices, and we all sort of knew that. And then at the same time, you were then looking at commodities, world price commodities. We're not really moving very fast at all in terms of arable output. And so you were looking at a sort of double whammy for us. And we were looking at supplying into a world market at very low margins anyway, and relying really very heavily on government grants to make the whole thing work. And yet we're on very poor soil. So our yields are 2 tons a hectare light of the sort of national average for winter wheat, for instance. And so there you are, you're producing very little, you're relying on subsidies from Europe to make any money at all. In fact, you were losing your subsidy money, and we were then going into this period of what the hell are we going to do? And then on top of all that, you had Europe saying, well, we're not going to continue paying 43% of our budget to farmers. This has got to change. It can't go on. And so in the early sort of 20s, you were then being told that you had to think about the future and come away from just relying on subsidies to make the whole thing work. And of course, nothing ever changed, and the subsidies kept on being paid. But we made the decision then that we wouldn't continue with what we were doing and make the change to something else. And we didn't know quite what that was.